All right. Next, let's talk about fungi. And fungal diseases are just as bad, if not worse, because they are going to spread very rapidly, and they can, um, like you can have your plant decimated without even getting the opportunity um, to apply any fungicide to that. And so, if you remember from soils, we talked about, we've got yeast and molds, we got mushrooms, and these are going to break down a lot of the lignin. Like their main job is to break down woody material. They're going to have a very similar disease cycle to our, uh, bacteria and viruses. They're going to penetrate. Remember that we've got the inoculation. We've got the aprosorium that is going to get in between and into those plant cells. And once they get into that, once they have that direct penetration, those enzymes will be released and they're going to break down that material through those plant cells. And so, because they don't have chlorophyll, they're looking for a way to get energy, and that energy is going to be within the plant. Remember that those nutrients, we talked about in soils, we talked about C. Hopkins Cafe managed by my cousin Mokel Nina. Most all um, organisms that live need at least a few of those, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium. And so that is why they are looking for those nutrients inside the plant. As far as the identification goes, in that this is more of a plant diagnostic thing. This is more like the diagnostic lab. I don't really think that any of us are really into microbial populations and uh, microbiology and any of those, and like understanding what these different structures are. Our job as agronomists or in agriculture is to identify that we have an issue. We see a symptom, and we now need to find out what the sign is in order to combat that, in order to overcome this. So our goal is to just identify that there's an issue, whether it's a bacteria, a fungal disease, or uh, a virus or a nematode. All right, so many of us have seen this. If you wake up early in the morning, you might see these little cobwebs on your yard. That is going to be that hyphae, that filamentous growth. Here we see this. We've got these filaments that are on this plant. That is that fungi extending itself so that it can find the next piece of plant material, and also sending out those spores. So this mycelium is making those spores. Those spores are then being translocated to other portions of the plant. And if you think about this, like you don't see this during the day after the plant has dried off, right? You see this early in the morning as that fungi is uh, in the presence of water. In case you hadn't noticed, water is a very big issue with our diseases. Here's another look. You can have this above or below ground. And if it's below ground, you can't see that. So you've got an infection below the ground you don't even know about, and you can't stop. And once you do notice it, guess what? It's too big to overcome. You recall back from module 2.1, we need three things in order for this pathogen to exist. We need a host, we need a pathogen, and then a conducive environment. And so generally warm temperatures, high humidity, and low wind. When do you think that is? Summertime, in the middle of July, right? Well, maybe this is more like the middle of May, but we're getting into like a time in the growing season when these conditions exist. And so let's think about a cornfield in that um we have rainfall and we've got soil moisture, and we've got evaporation. We've got some evapotranspiration. But think about a corn canopy in that there's not a lot of airflow through there. There's not a lot of wind movement to dry that water. So we've got high humidity with moisture, hopefully, unless there's a drought, with low wind. All right, so back to, we've got our intercellular growth and our intracellular. Remember, inter is between the cells, intra is into the cells. From soils, we talked about the endomycorrhiza and the ectomycorrhiza. So we've got good fungi and we have bad fungi. That endo and ectomycorrhiza are important for creating like an extra arm or like an extension of our roots, in that we can mine the soil for more water and nutrients. However, if you have the bad fungi, you will not get that extension. You will actually get a reduction. We have our common fungal diseases. We've got sooty molds. You'll start to see this sort of blackish material on here. It's possible that this can be caused from insects as well. And what's important is that we see something is wrong. This is not good. And then that we need to look a little bit more and see if we have maybe aphids underneath that are causing this, or some insect that is releasing this mold, or if this is actually being caused by a fungus. We've got mildews. Mildews is just going to have this, either powdery or downy mildew that's just white. We've got rust. Rust you're going to be able to see very clearly. We've got this orangish sort of rusty color, and then we've also got smuts. And so smut is an issue in that how do you see this? You've got your corn husk around there, and then when you go to harvest this, you don't know that you've got this issue, right? And so then when this goes into the combine and we get all this husked off, you've now got all this fungus, this smut that gets mixed in with all of the corn that's being harvested. And if this gets registered at, the grain elevator, then you get docked for that. You don't even know. You can't do anything about this. So being sure and trying to make sure that you've got a good environment, that you've got good airflow through your corn, making sure that you don't provide ideal conditions for this, you can minimize that. So for our mildews, we got powdery and downy. One is going to be white. One is going to be the sort of like a part of the leaf. This is probably going to be on the leaf, like something that you could probably scrape off. This you can probably not scrape off. And so you can see that we have this blotting of our cells, right? And then also that these are starting to grow together because that mycelium and that hyphae have, like, the aprosorium, or we got this intracellular and intercellular infection that is degrading those cells. And so those will start to coalesce together. And once this happens, it's very difficult for that plant to overcome this. Here's another look again. We've now got powdery and downy mildew on the same leaf. We've got these white spots, and then we've also got these sort of yellowed out spots that this is from the cell not having enough nitrogen. That's kind of clear point there. So some of the damages, we've seen this, like at least these last two slides. We're going to have some deformed buds because those plants aren't getting enough nutrients. It can destroy the flowers of the fruits. We'll get this stunted growth. If we don't have good growth, we don't have good flowering, we don't have enough nutrient transfer, and that's going to impact our yield. So we want to make sure that we don't water in the evening, because remember that we need a conducive environment, and we need a pathogen, and we need a host. And so We like warm conditions, high humidity, high moisture, and no wind flow, no airflow. So for our, let's say for our turf grasses, what we want to do is we apply that water in the morning time. And also, so we're going to mow, we're going to knock some of that dew off, and then we're going to water, and we're going to get all of that water into the ground so that we're providing that for the root. But it also serves a purpose in that we're not leaving water on that leafy material for, 2 or 3 hours early in the morning as those temperatures start to rise. So you don't want to water at night. You would want to water early in the morning because you're going to provide enough water for that plant to start growing once that sun comes out, and you're going to take the water off of the leaf. We can have resistant varieties. We want to make sure that we've got light and air. And so the more light that we have, the more photosynthesis that we're conducting, the stronger that plant is going to be. And then air circulation. Here's just another look at how this sort of mildew will spread. We've got these spores. Here we have our historium. We've got our penetration. We've got hyphae making it in between. We're making these spores. Those spores are spreading. We're creating, give me this back. We're creating more opportunities for more infection. Next, we have rust. Most of our rusts are caused by Puccinia species, and because we know this, there are certain chemicals that we can use in order to combat that, because we know specifically that these chemicals attack Puccinia in a certain way. And we'll talk about this more in Module 3. We'll have these little pustules of spores in this orangish color. So we've got a symptom in that something looks wrong, and then you can take a knife and scrape this off and put these pustules under the microscope and determine that that is a Puccinia species, that it's a fungus. If you make it into plant pathology, the more you do this, the better you'll get at that. Our frog eye leaf spot caused by Cercospora species. This is a very big issue in soybean. And so we'll notice these spots on our leaves. And you would probably need to put this leaf under a microscope. You probably wouldn't be able to scrape anything off of this. This leaf would need to go under a microscope, and you would be able to determine that Cercospora is causing these issues. And eventually, if you don't take care of this quick enough, you'll start, it will take over this whole leaf, and we'll see this in the next slide. Here we go. Warm, humid weather with cloudy days and frequent rainfall. Now, it's not to say that this frequent rainfall means that we're getting rain every day, but if you get enough rain within a short period of time, let's say it rains for 2 or 3 days straight, you've now created an environment, and if it's raining, it's likely to be cloudy. So there's not a lot of photosynthesis. And if there's not a lot of photosynthesis, then our plants can't defend against this. So just to be aware that if you have these warm, humid conditions, that you're likely going to be susceptible to these infections. Here's our frog eye leaf spot, completely taken over this whole entire soybean plant. We're not producing photosynthates. We're probably not going to flower very well, probably not going to have good yield. We're damping off. Pythium, Phytophthora, and Rhizoctonia. This is particularly important in our vegetables and our turf grasses because they're so close to the soil. That's where you're going to find these fungi in the soil. And our signs and symptoms, it's just going to be like it's just gone. Like there's no where did all my grass go? And so what happens is that this will infect the roots, and if the roots aren't taking up water, then our plant's not performing photosynthesis, and very quickly you can have, like, you can see this is all gone. How do you grow back out of that? And so in our turf species, it's better to, like, as soon as you see this, immediately let someone know and start to spray, because if you don't, it will take this over very quickly. Look at all these spots, and each of those spots will start to grow into larger spots. And once those spots are gone, you can't grow that turf grass back. So the signs and the symptoms, below the soil, will, you see an issue on the top and you don't see like frog eye leaf spot or something, or maybe it's a bacterial wilt. Like you don't know. You pull up your plant and you can see that your roots are dead, and there's just not a lot of root mass here. And if there's no roots, then there's no shoots, and if there's no shoots, then there's no roots. So above ground, you'll see the stunting and the wilting. You'll pull up that particular plant, or maybe you'll dig up a section of your turf, and you'll see that your roots are non-existent. And you also have to think about, for turf grass, let's think about the roots, in that our turf grass is very small, which means it doesn't have a very like long root system, because there's the root shoot ratio. And if you don't have strong roots, then you don't have strong shoots. No strong shoots, no strong roots. So that's why we see this very quick sort of disintegration of this turf material, because it's taking over the roots so quickly and the plant can't overcome that. Next, we have anthracnose. And so anthracnose caused by these particular species. We're going to find this in trees and our vegetables and fruits. We'll see these twigs die. The older leaves will have these like irregular brown areas. You'll pretty much not, it just causes defoliation and completely takes over all of those leaf materials. And we may end up getting some branches that'll die. So because we have sycamores and these elms, it's possible that it can die. Like these trees are susceptible not only to these fungi, but also to insects, and it's important to understand which one it is so that you can overcome that. We might have these twig blights, right? And so there's going to be, we'll still have the twigs, but we have no leaf growth. Oh, give me that back. You might even see some oozes on the branches. We got this witch's broom. You might see some ooze on the branch. And so this is where you would determine on whether or not it's a bacteria or whether it's a fungi. And you'll have to send that off to the plant diagnostic lab. Here's a better look at our anthracnose, a little bit different from our frog eye leaf spot. And then notice the black edges, like the black inside of this necrotic spot. So that material is still together. Like the leaf material is still held together, but that anthracnose is like making sure that it can spread before we cause this hole. Notice here that we've now caused, we've got enough spread going on here, and then eventually this tissue just dies. All right, so that's going to end it for fungal diseases. Remember that we've got mildews, rust, we've got frog eye leaf spot, damping off. This is going to kill our roots. And then if our roots aren't growing, then our shoots aren't going to grow either. And then finally, anthracnose. And this is, this can be maybe even mistaken for frog eye leaf spot. But notice these light spots versus the dark spots. All right. And so the more that you do this, if you get into this, the more that you do it, you'll be able to recognize those a little bit easier. So that's going to end it for fungal diseases. We'll move into our viruses and our nematodes in the next video, just a little short introduction. And then moving into module 3, we'll talk about how to control all of these things. All right. I'll see y'all in the next video.